The paper said he was free, the room said otherwise. Two men stood between him and the door, not soldiers, not overseers, something worse. Men who smiled while deciding how long you belonged to them. Ezra Cole understood the game the moment the bell rang. That sound wasn't for help, it wasn't for order, it was a signal, a quiet one. The kind that meant someone had already lost. He kept his hands still, learned that young, still hands live longer. The clerk didn't look up when he spoke Ezra's name. Didn't need to. The paper in front of him already told the story they wanted told. No employment, the clerk said. Not accusing, just confirming. Ezra felt the weight of 6 days on a train settle into his bones. 6 days of hope riding beside him like a stranger who promised too much. 6 days holding onto a folded document stamped by men who'd never met him, never touched the fields, never watched a child get pulled away screaming. That paper said he wasn't owned. The clerk rang the bell anyway. That's when Ezra knew freedom had rules, and every rule came with a price. They didn't rush him, didn't grab him, didn't shout. That's how it always starts when someone wants to keep things clean. One of the deputies leaned close. Breath smelled like coffee and certainty. "Law's the law," he said softly, like advice. Ezra walked when they told him to walk. The hallway remembered him. Same walls, same iron, fresh paint trying to lie about old blood. The cell door closed with a sound Ezra hadn't heard in years. A sound that crawls into your spine and stays there. Inside, the air was thick with men who already knew how this ended. No shouting, no pleading. Just eyes watching the floor like it might open and swallow them whole. An old man finally spoke. First time back. Ezra nodded once. "Then listen close," the man said. "They don't need chains anymore, they got paper." Ezra wanted to argue, wanted to hold up his freedom papers like a shield. But shields don't work when the other side writes the rules. They took him out of the cell not long after, not to beat him, not to starve him, to talk. The room was clean, too clean. Sunlight came through real glass. There was a painting on the wall of a man washing another man's feet. Ezra didn't trust rooms like that. The preacher stood when Ezra entered, extended a hand. "You're safe here," the preacher said. That's when Ezra knew he was. The preacher spoke slow, careful, every word chosen like it had been polished before being allowed out. He talked about structure, about order, about how too much freedom too fast could ruin a man. Ezra didn't interrupt. Men like this mistake silence for agreement. Let them. The preacher slid the contract across the desk. Voluntary, it said at the top. Ezra stared at the word. "Sign," the preacher said gently, "and you work 1 year. Agriculture, supervised, corrected when necessary. At the end, you walk out with proof you're ready for the world." "And if I don't?" Ezra asked. The preacher smiled the way doctors smile before bad news. "Then the state decides you're unwilling," he said. "And unwilling men go where the earth is dark and the air is thin." Ezra thought of his wife's hands, of his daughter chasing light she couldn't catch yet. He signed. The wax seal hit the page like a final word. By dawn, they had him in irons that weren't called irons, loaded into wagons that weren't called cages, bound for fields that hadn't changed their mind about who belonged to them. The man in charge called them workers, said it like a kindness. He read the rules with a bored voice. Quotas that broke backs, fees that ate wages, penalties that never ended. Ezra did the math before the man finished talking. Debt was the point. The barracks smelled like old promises, painted white, labeled new, built for the same reason as always. A woman named Martha met his eyes across the room. Didn't smile, didn't look away. "Don't believe the timeline," she said quietly. "They keep you as long as you keep breathing." The bell rang before the sun showed its face. Fields waited, cotton heavy and sharp like it remembered everything. Ezra bent to work. His body remembered too. Hands moved without asking permission. Back bent into old shapes. Blood came quick. 200 pounds, they said. Ezra knew that number, knew it was a lie meant to look honest. By nightfall, only a few made it. The rest got marks. Marks turn into months. Ezra missed quota by 28 pounds. The ledger noticed. Behind a shed, someone screamed and stopped screaming. No one looked. That night, Ezra sat on his bunk staring at the paper that said he was free. The paper didn't argue back. It never does. Martha leaned close. "You see it now." she asked. Ezra nodded. This ain't about work, she said. It's about time. They're stealing it slow so nobody panics. Ezra lay back, listening to men cry the way men cry when they're not allowed to. Somewhere in the compound, a preacher slept clean and sure of himself. Ezra stared at the ceiling and understood something important. This place wasn't built to hold bodies. It was built to hold futures. And once you see that, once you really see it, you start asking a dangerous question. Who profits when nobody ever finishes their sentence? Outside, the bell rang again. By the third week, Ezra learned the rhythm, not the work, the watching. Every system breathes, inhales discipline, exhales fear. The men on horseback didn't need to shout anymore. Their silence did the job. Ezra learned which rows got checked twice, which supervisors liked numbers more than blood, which ones liked blood more than numbers. That's how you survive. You don't fight the whip, you study the hand holding it. Martha noticed. You count things, she said one night, voice low. People who count don't stay blind long. Ezra shrugged. Blind gets you buried. She nodded like that answer cost him something. That night she showed him the papers, not all of them, just enough. Folded sheets hidden under a loose floorboard, contracts with dates scratched out and rewritten, signatures stacked on top of signatures like sins trying to disappear. These ain't mistakes, Martha said. They're habits. Ezra read slow, names repeated, sentences extended. Fees added after the fact. One man sentenced 6 months, still there 3 years later. Another died owing money. Ezra exhaled through his nose. They running a ledger, not a prison. Martha's eyes stayed sharp, and ledgers don't scream. Days passed, then weeks. Ezra stopped missing quota by accident, started missing it by design. Too perfect draws attention. Too short gets you hurt. He lived in the middle, that's where the ghosts survive. The preacher came on Sundays, clean suit, warm words, hands that never touched dirt. He talked about purpose, about how pain builds character. Ezra watched the crowd instead of the pulpit, saw men nod because nodding kept you breathing. After service, the preacher found Ezra like he always did. You're progressing, he said. I can see it. Ezra said nothing. I'm still searching for your family, the preacher added, soft as silk. Records take time. Ezra felt the hook slide deeper. That night a boy didn't come back from the shed. No announcement, no explanation. By morning his bunk was empty, blanket folded neat. Martha didn't look at it. That's how they erase questions, she said. The next supply wagon arrived 2 days later. That's when Ezra saw the opening. Wagons bring things in, but they also take things out. Empty barrels, broken tools, paperwork nobody double checks. Martha had already seen it too. They didn't speak about it right away. Plans die when they hear too much air. Instead, they watched, guard rotations, counting habits, who got bored and when. The system trusted its own weight. That's always a mistake. On the 4th night, Martha whispered, if someone vanished during loading, they wouldn't know until count. Ezra didn't answer. He didn't need to. 2 nights later, she brought more papers, heavier this time, ledgers, real ones. Enough to burn the place down, she said. Ezra held them and felt the danger settle into his chest. This wasn't escape anymore. This was war. If this gets out, he said, they won't just punish us. Martha smiled thin. They already are. The plan formed without ceremony. No speeches, no bravery, just timing. Ezra would take the risk, not because he was special, because he had something left to lose. If you get caught, Martha said, they'll bury you in years. Ezra nodded. They already tried. The morning of the wagon, Ezra worked clean. Hit quota, didn't speak, didn't look up. The supervisor nodded once. That nod almost got him killed. When loading began, the yard filled with noise, shouting, wood scraping wood, horses stamping. Chaos makes people lazy. Ezra lifted crates like he belonged there, climbed into the wagon like he'd done it 100 times. Martha shouted about missing barrels. Supervisors turned. That's all it took. Ezra slid under the tarp. Dark closed around him fast. Air went thin. Heart got loud. More crates loaded on top. Footsteps inches from his face. Someone tugged the tarp tight. Ezra didn't move. The wagon rolled. Every bump drove pain through his ribs, every breath felt borrowed. He counted heartbeats like they were currency. 100, 200. 1,000. Voices drifted in from outside. Men talking about crops, about church, about how the program was a blessing. The wagon stopped. Silence. Ezra waited. Then he heard it. A man laughing. Reverend says we're saving souls. Ezra closed his eyes because he knew something now. If this worked, the preacher would come for him, not with anger, with calm. And calm men don't stop hunting until they're certain the problem is solved. Ezra pushed the tarp aside. Light hit him hard. Town smells. Freedom smells. He dropped to the ground and walked like he belonged there. Didn't run. Running tells the truth too loud. He turned the corner and vanished. Back at the camp, count would come soon. A number would be wrong. And when that happened, the system would wake up. And systems don't forgive. They retaliate. Somewhere behind him, a bell was already being lifted. Not yet rung, just waiting. Ezra didn't look back. That's rule one when you steal something powerful. You don't admire it, you move. Town streets pretended not to notice him. Stores open. Men talking. Life going on like nobody was missing yet. That's the dangerous part. The quiet before the number gets counted. He walks steady. Too fast draws eyes. Too slow invites questions. Every step away from the wagon felt illegal, like the ground itself might raise a hand and point. He kept one thought in front of him like a shield. Find the school, find the man, disappear. Martha had described it once. Blue paint, near the creek, small enough to be ignored. Ezra followed the water. Water remembers paths better than people. He found the building tucked where ambition didn't live, a door that looked tired. A sign nailed crooked. He knocked. Nothing. Knocked again. Footsteps. A pause. The door opened just enough for eyes to measure him. Are you lost? The man asked. Ezra leaned in, low voice. Calloway Place, he said. Martha. The door opened all the way. Inside smelled like chalk and stubborn hope. Books stacked where prophet never bothered to look. The man locked the door behind him. You shouldn't be here, he said. I know, Ezra replied. That's why I am. He laid the bundle on the desk, unwrapped it slow. Paper has weight when it's dangerous. The man, William, didn't touch it at first, just read, eyes tightening with every line. Lord, he breathed. They wrote it all down. That's how they sleep, Ezra said. William moved fast then, too fast. These go north, he said, today. How long before they know? Ezra asked. William didn't hesitate. Before dark. Ezra nodded. That was enough time to make a bad decision. William hesitated. There's something else. Ezra's stomach sank. I found your daughter, William said, not where you are. He slid a paper across. A name, an age, a place 20 miles away, an industrial school. Ezra read it twice, then once more to punish himself. Is she alive? He asked. Yes. That word nearly dropped him to his knees. And my wife? He asked, though he already knew the answer lived in the silence. William shook his head. The room felt smaller. Ezra folded the paper careful, put it away like it might break. I'm going to her, he said. They'll kill you, William replied. Ezra met his eyes. They already tried. William packed food. Water, didn't argue. Some arguments insult reality. Night found Ezra on the road, then off it. Then nowhere anyone bothered to name, he walked until his feet stopped asking permission. By dawn he saw the place. Fences, smoke. Children moving like shadows where laughter should have been. He watched all day. Patterns, whistles, gaps. That night he climbed. Wood scraped skin. Pain didn't matter. Inside, rows of small bodies breathed like a broken choir. He found her. Older, thinner. Still his, he whispered her name. Her eyes opened. Papa. That word saved him. They ran. A bell screamed behind them. Dogs answered. The woods swallowed them whole. Ezra carried her when she couldn't go on, ran when his legs begged for mercy. Voices followed, then horses, men talking. We want him alive, one said. Reverend's orders. Ezra pressed into thorns and didn't breathe. The men passed, but the hunt didn't stop. North was the only direction that mattered. By morning they crossed a line nobody marked on maps. Trees carved with a sign Ezra remembered from stories whispered too quietly. Then rifles stepped out of the woods. "Don't move," a man said. Ezra raised his hands, slow. "Calloway," he said, "running." The man studied him, then nodded once. "You made it," he said, "for now." The settlement opened like a held breath finally released. Water, food, people who watched the trees like they expected trouble, because they did. A woman handed Ezra a newspaper days later. Whitmore's name sat heavy in ink. Investigations, hearings, questions that made powerful men nervous, but nervous men don't give up. That night, Isaiah, the man with the rifle, spoke plain. "They want witnesses," he said. "You." Ezra looked at his daughter. "Safe for the moment, not safe forever. If I speak," Ezra said, "they'll come." Isaiah nodded. "They'll come anyway." The fire cracked. Somewhere far south, a preacher practiced answers, and somewhere closer than Ezra liked, men with paper and guns were already deciding how to make an example. Ezra understood the move in front of him: stay silent, stay alive, or speak, and make the whole board shake. He didn't answer that night, because the most dangerous choices don't ask twice. They wait. And the waiting had just begun. Waiting is a weapon. Ezra learned that in the settlement. No bells, no quotas, no man standing over you counting your breath, just quiet. And quiet gives your mind room to do damage. Every morning Ezra woke before the sun anyway. Old habits don't ask permission to leave. He'd sit on the step outside the cabin, listening to the land breathe, watching his daughter sleep like she was afraid the world might take her back if she closed her eyes too hard. Isaiah came by the third day, didn't sit, didn't soften his voice. "The papers are spreading," he said. "North already got a taste. South's pretending it's rain." Ezra nodded. "Federal men want names," Isaiah continued. "Faces, stories they can't file away." Ezra didn't answer. "They want you in a room with Whitmore," Isaiah said. "Same air, same oath." That got his attention. Ezra stood slowly. "When?" Isaiah looked past him toward the tree line. "Sooner than I like." That night Ezra didn't sleep. He saw the preacher's face the way it really was, not kind, certain. Men like Whitmore didn't see themselves as villains, that's why they lasted. Leah sat beside him, knees pulled in, older than she should have been. "They'll ask questions," she said. "They'll try to make you small." Ezra smiled faintly. "I've been small my whole life. They still couldn't keep me." She nodded, then asked the question he'd been circling. "What if they don't listen?" Ezra looked out into the dark. "Then we make sure they remember," he said. 2 days later the wagon came. Federal colors this time. Soldiers who didn't look comfortable holding protection like it was fragile glass. Ezra stepped in without ceremony. The settlement watched him go like men watching a storm walk toward the house. The city swallowed him whole. Stone, noise, eyes that didn't care unless ink told them to. They put him in a room before the hearing. Alone, too clean, a knock not loud. Whitmore stepped in like he owned the air. Older, thinner, still calm. "Ezra," he said, almost fond. Ezra didn't rise. "You could have stayed hidden," Whitmore continued. "Plenty do." Ezra met his eyes. "You taught me that hiding just makes the cage smaller." Whitmore smiled. "That's a dangerous misunderstanding." They stood there, two men who understood power differently. "I never hated you," Whitmore said. "I pitied you." Ezra leaned back. "That's worse." A marshal cleared his throat at the door. Time. In the hearing room, voices stacked like walls, judges, lawyers, men who never bent their backs asking men who'd broken theirs for the truth. Ezra spoke anyway, not loud, not angry, precise. He told them how contracts breathe, how debt grows teeth, how children disappear under ink. He didn't beg, didn't plead, he described. That scared them more. Then Leah spoke, and the room forgot how to breathe. Children aren't supposed to sound certain. It breaks the illusion. Whitmore listened without flinching, but Ezra saw it, the crack. Afterward, the city buzzed like it had found something sharp in its mouth. Reporters ran, letters flew, men met behind doors. Ezra and Leah were moved, protected. Protection is just another word for being watched. One night, a note slid under the door, no signature, just a sentence. Some systems forgive, some don't. Ezra folded it once, twice. Then he burned it. Outside, a car idled too long, then left. Ezra knew that sound. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. Somewhere Whitmore was praying. Somewhere else men were deciding how to make an example without leaving fingerprints. Ezra sat beside his daughter and felt the board shift again. He'd made his move. Now the system would answer. And when it did, it wouldn't come wearing scripture, it would come quiet. The answer didn't come loud, it came delayed. That's how power likes to move when it's thinking. Days passed, then weeks. No knock at the door. No verdict worth celebrating, just silence stretched thin. Ezra learned something important during that quiet. Systems don't panic, they adjust. Whitmore disappeared from public view, not arrested, not forgiven, repositioned. New language started showing up in the papers. Reform. Oversight. Improved conditions. Same machine, fresh paint. Isaiah sent word from the settlement, some camps closed, others renamed. Children moved, men reassigned. When one door shuts, the hallway just gets longer. Ezra walked the city at night when he could, stayed where light touched shadow. He felt eyes sometimes, not hunters, auditors, men sent to see if the problem was still breathing. Leah stayed close, too quiet for her age. One evening she asked, "Did we win?" Ezra thought before answering. "We interrupted," he said. "That's not the same thing." A week later they got papers, official, stamped, protection extended, relocation recommended. North, always north. Isaiah's message came with it. They won't stop watching, but they won't rush anymore either. That's when Ezra understood the cost. Survival had moved into a different bracket. On the last night before leaving, Ezra saw Whitmore one final time across a street, under a gas lamp. The preacher looked smaller, not weaker, just shifted. They didn't speak. Whitmore tipped his hat, not surrender. Acknowledgement, a message passed without words. You hurt the machine. You didn't kill it. Ezra turned away first, because knowing when to leave is its own kind of power. The train north waited like a question nobody could answer clean. Leah held his hand tight. "Will they follow us?" she asked. Ezra watched the city slide past. "They already are," he said, "just slower now." The wheels turned. Paper rustled in pockets. New laws being drafted. New contracts waiting to be signed. Ezra leaned back and closed his eyes. He'd seen the board. He knew the truth most men never learn. Freedom isn't a place. It's a moving target. And the moment you stop walking toward it, someone else names it for you. The train disappeared into the dark. Behind them, the system kept breathing. Ahead of them, nothing was promised. That's how real endings work. They don't close the door. They leave it cracked. And somebody always reaches for the handle. North didn't feel like freedom. It felt like distance. Distance from names that knew you. Distance from men who could say your name and make doors open or close. Ezra learned that quick. New town, new work. Same eyes measuring him when they thought he wasn't looking. Power travels, it just takes different roads. They stayed where the river bent and the factories hummed low. A place that pretended to mind its business. Ezra kept his head down, hands busy, voice scarce. Leah started school again. Real school this time. Books that didn't smell like sermons, but children talk, and stories move faster than trains. One afternoon, Ezra noticed a man standing across the street too long, hat brim low, boots clean for the work he claimed to do. The man never crossed, just watched, left. That night Ezra counted exits. A week later a letter arrived. No return address, paper thick, ink confident. "You embarrassed good men. Good men don't forget." Ezra folded it carefully, didn't show Leah. Fear shared too early teaches the wrong lesson. Isaiah wrote soon after. "Someone else asking questions up here. Not law, not yet." Ezra exhaled slow. This wasn't pursuit, this was pressure. Men like Whitmore didn't chase. They waited for gravity to do the work. Ezra knew the move coming before it arrived. One night the landlord knocked, apologetic, uncomfortable. "New ownership," he said. "Nothing personal." Nothing ever is. By morning Ezra had a bag packed. Leah watched him quiet. "They're doing it again," she said. "Moving us." Ezra knelt. "No," he said, "we're moving first." They left before sunrise. Didn't say goodbye, because goodbyes leave tracks. As they walked toward the station, Ezra felt it again. That familiar tightening. The game wasn't over. He'd cracked the board, shifted a few pieces. But somewhere behind him, someone was resetting the clock. And this time, they weren't trying to take his labor. They were coming for his silence. The train whistle blew. Ezra didn't know if getting on meant escape or stepping into the next trap. And that's where the real danger lives, right when you think you're ahead, and you're not sure who made the last move. The train didn't slow for doubt. It never does. Ezra sat facing forward, eyes fixed on the glass, watching towns blur into shapes that didn't want to be remembered. Every stop felt like a decision someone else could make for him. Every whistle sounded too much like a warning. Across from him, Leia slept with her head against his arm, still, too still. Ezra stayed awake for both of them. That's another rule you learn early. If someone has decided you're a problem, sleep becomes a luxury you can't afford. 2 rows back, a man turned a newspaper without reading it, turned it again. Ezra caught the reflection in the window. Hat brim, neutral face, no curiosity. Just waiting. Ezra didn't move. If this was the moment, panic would only shorten it. The train lurched into the next station. Doors opened. People moved. The man stood. Ezra's hand tightened around the small knife he kept wrapped in cloth inside his coat. Not to fight, just to decide how the story ended if it had to end here. The man walked past them. Didn't look down, didn't slow, got off the train. Ezra didn't exhale until the doors shut again. That's how pressure works. It reminds you it can touch you even when it chooses not to. They got off 2 stops early. Never ride to the place you plan to go. They walked through alleys that smelled like coal dust and rain, found a boarding house that didn't ask questions because it had too many of its own. That night, Ezra heard footsteps in the hall, not close, not stopping, just enough to be felt. In the morning, there was another letter under the door, shorter this time. You speak too much for a man who wants to disappear. Ezra burned it without reading it twice. Leia watched him. They don't want us gone, she said. They want us quiet. Ezra nodded. That's when you know you mattered. He went out that day and didn't come back until dark. Not because he was reckless, because he was listening. People talk when they think they're safe, especially men who believe the worst is behind them. Ezra learned names, not of hunters, of messengers, men who never touched blood but made sure it moved where it was needed. That night, Ezra wrote for the first time since the hearing, not to newspapers, not to officials, to people like Isaiah, like William, like the ones who understood that silence is a resource and power hoards it. He didn't tell them where he was. He told them what was happening, because when pressure spreads, it loses shape. 3 days later, the footsteps stopped. No letters, no watchers who forgot how to pretend. That's when Ezra felt the real danger, because when a system goes quiet all at once, it's either losing or choosing a cleaner method. Ezra packed again. Leia didn't ask where they were going this time. She already knew. Forward, always forward. But as they stepped into the early morning, Ezra felt it in his chest, a certainty colder than fear. Someone had decided not to scare him anymore. They were done warning, and whatever came next wouldn't announce itself at all. They walked anyway, because stopping was the one move that guaranteed the system won. And Ezra Cole had learned something the hard way. The most dangerous men aren't the ones who chase you. They're the ones who wait until you think you've escaped. The city changed its posture. Ezra felt it before he saw it. No more watchers who lingered too long. No men pretending to read papers. No footsteps pacing the hall. That kind of silence doesn't mean safety. It means permission. They moved again. Smaller towns, cheaper rooms, names shortened. Histories trimmed until they fit inside a sentence that wouldn't invite curiosity. Ezra became good at that, answering without saying anything, smiling just enough to end a question. Leia watched him do it. "You're hiding again," she said one night. Ezra didn't deny it. "I'm positioning," he said. "There's a difference." She accepted that. Didn't like it, but she understood the board now too. That's the part Ezra hated most. The night had almost ended. It didn't feel important at first. Rain, late. A knock that wasn't urgent. 3 taps, measured. Ezra stood slowly. Knife already in his hand, hidden by his leg. He didn't ask who it was. The door opened to a man in a plain coat. No badge, no weapon visible, just eyes that didn't blink much. "Mr. Cole," the man said. Not a question. Ezra didn't correct him. "We're not here to hurt you," the man continued. That would be inefficient. Leah stepped closer to Ezra. The man noticed, adjusted his tone. You made things complicated, he said, for people who prefer clean lines. Ezra leaned against the doorframe. And you're here to simplify. The man smiled thin. Something like that. He took out a folded paper, not a threat, an offer. No more letters, no more pressure, no more moving. In exchange, Ezra would stop talking, stop writing, stop being useful to anyone who wanted to shake the system again. You keep your daughter safe, the man said. You live quiet, we all move on. Ezra looked at the paper, didn't touch it, and if I don't? The man shrugged. Then accidents start happening around people you care about, not because we're cruel, because we're thorough. Silence stretched. Rain tapped the window like it was counting seconds. Leah spoke before Ezra could. If he signs, she said, voice steady. Does that mean you'll leave other people alone too? The man hesitated, just a fraction. Ezra caught it. There it is, Ezra said softly. The parts you didn't write down. The man folded the paper back up. You're smarter than you look, he said. Ezra smiled. So are you, that's why you didn't come with friends. Another pause. The man stepped back. Think about it, he said. I'll come again. No, Ezra replied, you won't. The man raised an eyebrow. You don't get to choose that. Ezra closed the door gently, locked it. He leaned his forehead against the wood and let out a breath he'd been holding for years. Leah looked up at him. You're not going to sign, she said. No, Ezra said. I already did once. That night Ezra wrote again. Not careful, not coded, honest. Names, methods, offers. He sent it everywhere he could, if the system wanted quiet. He was about to make noise expensive. As dawn crept in, Ezra sat by the window watching the street, waiting, because now he understood the final rule. When a system stops threatening you and starts negotiating, it's because you've become dangerous, and dangerous men don't get left alone. They get removed. Ezra didn't know if morning would bring another knock, or something that didn't knock at all. He just knew one thing. Whatever came next would decide everything. And somewhere someone was already moving a piece Ezra couldn't see yet. Morning came wrong. Too clean, too ordinary. Ezra didn't trust it. He watched the street from behind the curtain. Milk wagon passed, man sweeping his stoop. A woman laughing like nothing in the world had teeth. That's when you know something's off. Systems don't forgive overnight. They reorganize. Ezra counted exits again. Front door, back stairs. Window that dropped into an alley that smelled like rot and second chances. Leah packed without being told. She de-learned the signs, quiet rooms, long pauses. The way Ezra's jaw set when the air felt crowded. You hear something? She asked. No, Ezra said. That's what I hear. They didn't make it to noon. The sound came first. Not loud, official, boots, measured steps, more than one. Ezra pulled Leah behind him as the knock landed. Hard this time, no patience in it. Federal inquiry, a voice called. Open the door. Ezra closed his eyes for half a second. That's how they do it when they want you calm. He opened the door. 3 men stood there, 2 uniforms, 1 suit. The man in the suit smiled like he'd practiced in a mirror. Mr. Cole, he said, we need to ask you a few questions. Won't take long. Ezra stepped aside, because refusing gets written down. Inside, the men looked around, not curious, cataloging. You've been active, the man in the suit said. Letters, statements, allegations. Ezra nodded. I told the truth. The man smiled thinner. Truth is expensive. He glanced at Leah. Ezra felt something cold settle behind his ribs. She won't be involved, Ezra said. Of course not, the man replied too fast. This is about you. Always is. They asked questions that circled instead of landing. Who contacted you? Who helped you? Who else is still talking? Ezra answered carefully, enough to seem cooperative. Not enough to end anyone else's life. Finally, the man in the suit closed his notebook. There's concern, he said, that your continued activity could destabilize ongoing reforms. Ezra met his eyes. So stop me. The man studied him. "We're considering options." That word, options, they left without arrest, without threats. That scared Ezra more than anything else so far. After they were gone, Leah whispered, "They're not done." "No," Ezra said, "they're deciding." That night Isaiah's message arrived through a third hand. "They're calling it containment now." Ezra sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Containment meant isolation, discredit, a race without blood, or something faster. He held Leah close. "If they come again," he said quietly, "and they separate us." She shook her head. "They won't." Ezra didn't correct her. Outside, a car idled too long, then another. Ezra reached for the knife again, not because it would save him, but because it reminded him he was still choosing. The light went out across the street, one by one, like someone testing darkness. Ezra knew then. The next move wouldn't be paperwork, it would be permanent, and whatever the system had decided. It was already on its way. The power didn't kick the door, it never does when it wants you intact. The lights came back on all at once. Too bright, too sudden. Ezra knew the trick. Shock first, control second. The knock returned, not loud, final. Ezra stood between it and Leah. When he opened the door, it wasn't uniforms this time. Two men, plain coats, hands visible, professional. "We're relocating you," one said, not asking. Ezra smiled without humor. "You already tried that." "This isn't for you," the other replied. "It's for the situation." That word again. They stepped inside without waiting. One moved toward Leah. Ezra moved faster. The room shifted. Tension snapped tight enough to sing. "She stays," Ezra said, voice low, certain. The men paused. They hadn't expected resistance that quiet. "We don't want trouble," the first man said. Ezra leaned forward just enough for them to feel him. "Then stop creating it." For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the second man spoke, softer. "You don't understand the scale you're interfering with." Ezra met his eyes. "I do. That's why you're here without badges." The men exchanged a look. Calculation. That's when the sound came from the back stairwell, a step that didn't belong, another presence. The first man's jaw tightened. Ezra saw it immediately. This wasn't the plan. A voice rose from behind them. Ezra Cole. Isaiah, standing in the hall like a bad memory that refused to stay buried. Behind him, more shadows, not law, not quiet, witnesses. The men at the door didn't turn around. They didn't have to. They already knew the math had changed. Isaiah's voice was calm, but it carried weight. "You touch him," Isaiah said, "and everything you're trying to keep quiet gets loud." Silence swallowed the room. The men backed away slowly, not defeated, postponed. "This isn't over," one said. Ezra nodded. "No, now it's public." The door closed. Isaiah exhaled. "They moved faster than I thought," he said, "which means you scared them more than they'll admit." Ezra looked at Leah, then at Isaiah, and now. Isaiah's eyes were serious. "Now," he said, "they decide whether it's cheaper to bury the truth." He paused, "or bury you." Ezra felt the board tilt again. Somewhere far above them, men were choosing between silence and blood. And Ezra Cole knew one thing for certain. The system never forgives the man who forces it to choose. Public doesn't mean safe, it just means witnessed. Isaiah didn't stay long. Men like him know when their presence helps, and when it paints a target. "You've got maybe 48 hours, he said. After that, they stop pretending this is about paperwork. Ezra nodded. Deadlines were familiar. Isaiah left through the back, melting into the city like a rumor that already did its damage. Ezra packed light again, but this time he didn't plan to run. Running tells the system it still owns the pace. Instead, Ezra did something quieter, more dangerous. He stayed. The next morning, Ezra took Leah somewhere crowded, a church basement hosting a community meeting. Too many eyes, too many names. Safety in numbers only works when the numbers can talk. Ezra spoke that afternoon. Not loud, not long, just enough. He didn't accuse, he described. Contracts that grew longer when you obeyed. Schools that taught children how to disappear into machines. Men who offered peace in exchange for silence. People listened. Some nodded, some looked away. A few took notes, that was enough. By nightfall, word had moved again, and when word moves, power starts leaking. Ezra felt it when he walked home. The air had weight, like a storm deciding where to land. A man followed him halfway down the block. Didn't hide it, didn't rush. Ezra turned. The man stopped too. They looked at each other under a flickering street lamp. Not enemies, messengers. "You're making this worse," the man said. Ezra shrugged. "Depends who you ask." The man stepped closer, lowered his voice. "They're not arguing anymore." Ezra nodded. "I figured. You're out of chances." Ezra leaned in just enough. "So are you." The man left without another word. Ezra stood there for a long moment, listening to the city breathe. When he went inside, Leah was waiting. "They came to my school," she said quietly, "asked questions." Ezra closed his eyes. "How many?" he asked. "Enough." That night Ezra wrote one last letter. Not to allies, not to officials, to the future. He sealed it, handed it to a woman who'd already lost too much to be scared. "If anything happens to me," he said, "this goes everywhere." She didn't ask questions. Good people never do when they understand the cost. Ezra lay down beside his daughter fully dressed. No sleep, just listening. Somewhere in the city a phone rang that shouldn't have. A decision was confirmed. A line was crossed. Ezra felt it in his chest before he heard anything else. The system wasn't warning him anymore. It was done talking. And when power stops speaking, it acts. Ezra stared at the ceiling, calm as ever, because he already knew. The next knock wouldn't ask him to choose. It would come to collect, and whether he answered alive or not. The story was already out. The knock came before dawn. Not hard, not polite, final. Ezra didn't jump, didn't rush. That's how you know a man has already accepted the cost. He kissed the top of Leah's head, once, like a promise he might not get to keep. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "remember this part, not the fear, the choice." She nodded, didn't cry. That hurt more than anything. Ezra opened the door. This time it wasn't strangers. It was law dressed up to look neutral. Two marshals. One local official Ezra recognized from the hearings. And behind them, half a step back, a man Ezra had never seen but instantly understood. No badge, no file, just confidence. "Ezra Cole," the official said, "you're being taken into protective custody pending further inquiry." Ezra smiled faintly. That's a lot of words for a cage. The man without the badge finally spoke. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Ezra stepped outside. Cold air, gray sky, street empty like it had been warned in advance. Leah stood in the doorway. "Papa," she said. Ezra turned. The man without the badge raised a hand just slightly, a signal. Ezra saw it. He understood exactly what it meant. Not yet. Ezra locked eyes with Leah. "No matter what they say," he told her, "you don't stop telling it." The marshals took his arms, not rough, not gentle. Efficient. As they walked him toward the waiting car, Ezra noticed something small. A second vehicle down the block. Engine running. No plates. That wasn't protection, that was insurance. The man without the badge leaned in close, voice low enough to stay clean. "You push the system into a corner," he said, "and systems don't feel guilt." Ezra nodded. "I know." The car door opened. Dark inside, quiet. As Ezra stepped in, he caught one last detail. A folder on the seat, thick, new, his name already printed on the tab. The door closed, the lock clicked. And as the car pulled away, Ezra realized something that sent a cold, steady calm through his chest. This wasn't about silencing him anymore. It was about deciding whether he was more valuable, alive, or as a lesson. The city disappeared behind them. The road ahead bent out of sight. And somewhere, someone was already writing the version of the story where Ezra Cole didn't get to finish his sentence. The question wasn't whether the system would strike. It was when. And whether Leah would hear the truth before it did. The car didn't take the highway. That told Ezra everything. Highways mean records, witnesses, explanations later. They took side streets. Industrial cuts where buildings leaned like they were tired of standing. No sirens, No urgency. That's how you move when time is already on your side. Ezra sat straight, hands cuffed in front, eyes forward. The man without the badge sat beside him now, close enough to smell clean soap and confidence. "You know how this ends," the man said casually. Ezra didn't look at him. "Everybody thinks they do." Man smiled at that, didn't deny it. They stopped under an overpass where the city forgot itself. Concrete pillars, graffiti like warnings nobody listened to. Another car waited, no lights, no plates. That's when Ezra felt it shift, not fear, clarity. This wasn't custody, it was editing. The man without the badge opened his door. "Walk with me," he said. Ezra stepped out. Cold air, oil and rust. Water dripping somewhere steady like a clock that didn't care. One of the marshals stayed back. The other turned away. That was the confirmation. "You could have lived quiet," the man said. "Raised your daughter, let the world fix itself slowly." Ezra finally looked at him. "World don't fix itself," he said. "It adjusts who it breaks." The man sighed, almost regretful. "You made powerful people look ugly," he said. "They don't forgive mirrors." Ezra nodded once. "That's fair." They walked a few steps farther, out of view from the road. The man stopped. "You got any last words?" he asked, not unkindly. Ezra thought of Leia, of fireflies, of paper chains snapping one story at a time. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Check your timing." The man frowned. That's when the sound came. Engines, more than two. Headlights flared under the overpass, washing everything in white. Voices, shouts, not police, not quiet. The man without the badge stepped back fast. Ezra smiled, because Isaiah had said something once, real calm. When the system moves in shadows, bring light with witnesses. Men emerged from the dark, armed, focused. "Not hunting, Ezra, watching them. Federal Bureau," a voice called out. "Hands where we can see them." The marshals froze. The man without the badge didn't. He ran. That was mistake number one. The echo of gunfire cracked the air, sharp, final. Ezra didn't move. He stood there while men shouted orders, while boots pounded concrete, while someone screamed for a medic who wouldn't arrive in time. A federal agent unlocked Ezra's cuffs. "You okay?" the agent asked. Ezra flexed his hands. "I will be," he said, "but not everyone's gonna like this." The agent nodded grimly. "Your letter reached the right desk." Ezra looked past him. The man without the badge lay still now, confidence gone, story finished. Ezra understood something then. The system hadn't chosen blood. It had lost control of the timing, and timing is everything. As they led him back toward the light, Ezra felt the weight shift again. This wasn't over. It never is. But somewhere Leia was waking up, and for the first time in a long time. The system was the one reacting, not deciding, and that scared it more than any witness ever could. They drove away as sirens finally arrived late, like apologies. Ezra watched the city wake up through the window. He knew one thing for sure now. You don't beat the machine by outrunning it. You beat it by forcing it into the daylight and letting everyone see how ugly it really is. Daylight changes the rules, not the outcome, the audience. Ezra sat in the back of the federal car, cuffs gone, wrists still remembering. City slid by slower now. Every block a witness, whether it wanted to be or not. The agent didn't talk much. Men who know the scope don't waste air. "You'll testify again," he said eventually. "Bigger room this time." Ezra nodded. Rooms don't scare him. Silence does. They stopped at a building with clean windows and tired guards. Inside, the air smelled like paper trying to be honest. A woman met them in the hallway, sharp eyes, no patience for theater. "You made enemies," she said, shaking Ezra's hand. "Serious ones." Ezra shrugged. "They found me first." She didn't smile. They put him in a room with water and a clock that ticked too loud. That clock wasn't for him. It was for whoever was late. Hours passed. Questions came in layers. Who offered what? Who threatened when? Who signed where? Ezra answered clean. No names he couldn't stand behind. No guesses. Truth is heavy. You don't toss it around. Near dusk, the woman returned. "Your daughter's safe," she said. "Relocated." Ezra closed his eyes for a second, just a second. "And the men from the overpass?" he asked. She hesitated. 2 marshals are suspended, she said. The other were still writing his story. Ezra understood that language. Writing is where damage hides. They moved him again after dark. Different car, different route. Protection changes shape when it's embarrassed. As they drove, Ezra noticed something small. A car behind them, far enough to deny, close enough to feel. He didn't say anything. The agent noticed anyway. Probably nothing, the agent said. Ezra watched the reflection in the glass. Probably never is. They turned onto a bridge, water black beneath, city lights trembling like they knew better. The car behind them closed the gap. Ezra leaned forward just a fraction. "Driver," he said calmly. "Don't speed up." The agent turned. "Why?" "Because if they want us fast," Ezra said. "They already lost patience." The driver held steady. The car behind swerved, cut close, too close. The agent reached for his radio. Static answered. Ezra smiled thin. "That's the thing about daylight," he said quietly. "It exposes everybody." The bridge narrowed, traffic slowed. The car behind dropped back again, waiting. Ezra felt the board one more time, a last adjustment, a final test. Somewhere ahead a door would open. A microphone would turn on. A name would be spoken that couldn't be unspoken. And somewhere else, someone was deciding whether to risk one more move in the light or let the truth finish the job. The car rolled on. The bridge ended. Ezra didn't relax, because the most dangerous moment isn't the chase. It's the pause right before the next choice, and the city was holding its breath. The car cleared the bridge. Traffic loosened its grip. The city exhaled like it had been pretending not to watch. Ezra stayed alert. That's another thing you learn. Danger doesn't end when the noise fades. It just learns to whisper. They pulled into a secure lot behind a building that didn't advertise what it protected. No sign. No flags. Inside, metal doors swallowed sound. The agent finally spoke like a man who'd been holding something back. "You understand," he said. "This doesn't make you untouchable." Ezra nodded. "Nothing ever does." They brought him to a room with no windows and one chair bolted to the floor. Not interrogation, assessment. A man entered alone, gray suit, no badge, different from the others. "I'm not here to threaten you," the man said. "I'm here to explain the temperature." Ezra leaned back as far as the chair allowed. "Go on." "You forced exposure," the man continued. "Exposure creates reaction. Reaction creates pressure." Ezra watched his hands, still, careful. "There are people," the man said, "who believe letting you speak again would cost more than stopping you quietly." Ezra met his eyes. "And there are people who think stopping me now would prove everything I said." The man smiled once. A professional's smile. "That's the balance," he said, "and it's unstable." He slid a folder onto the table. Inside, newspaper drafts, headlines not printed yet, names circled in ink, Ezra's name among them. "You're scheduled to testify in 48 hours, the man said. "Public, recorded." Ezra closed the folder. "And in those 48 hours?" he asked. The man stood. "Anything can happen," he said. "Cars fail, witnesses panic, stories get rewritten." He paused at the door. "Stay alive," he added. "And you change the direction of things." The door shut. Ezra sat alone with the hum of the building in his bones. Somewhere else in the city, Leia was sleeping under a name that wasn't hers yet. Somewhere else, men were staring at clocks, deciding if time was still on their side. Ezra breathed slow. He'd seen this position before, not on paper, not in courts, on the street, right before someone decided whether you were worth the risk. 48 hours, that's what he had. 48 hours before the system either swallowed him whole or learned it couldn't. Ezra smiled to himself, calm and steady, because the system had already made one mistake. It assumed he was running from the endgame. He was. He was walking straight into it, and whatever move came next, someone was going to lose more than sleep. The first night is always the longest. Ezra sat on the narrow bed, shoes still on, back straight. Rooms like this weren't meant for rest. They were meant for waiting. Waiting does things to people. It convinces them the fight already happened. Ezra didn't fall for that. Somewhere past midnight, the hum of the building shifted, not louder, different. He caught it the same way he used to catch a change in the fields. When birds stopped talking all at once, footsteps past his door didn't stop. Then came the sound that mattered, a key, not his door, somewhere close enough to count. Ezra exhaled slow. This wasn't an attempt, it was a check. Morning came gray and tight. They moved him again. Different hallway, different guard. That's another sign. Rotation means uncertainty. The guard didn't speak, didn't meet his eyes. Fear wears silence when it's wearing a uniform. They put Ezra in a smaller room this time. Table. 2 chairs. The woman from before entered with a man Ezra hadn't seen yet. Younger, sharper, ambition still intact. "We lost someone last night," the young man said without preamble. Ezra raised an eyebrow. "Accident." The woman cut in. "Enough." She turned to Ezra. "Someone tried to interfere," she said, "from the inside." Ezra nodded once. That was always coming. The young man leaned forward. "You're causing fractures," he said. "People choosing sides who didn't want to." Ezra's voice stayed calm. "That's what truth does when it's heavy enough." Silence stretched. Then the woman spoke again. "Your daughter asked a question this morning." Ezra's chest tightened just slightly. He didn't show it. "What did she ask?" He said. "She asked," the woman replied, "why men in suits get scared when stories stop being theirs." Ezra smiled. "Smart kid." The young man didn't smile back. "This is your last window," he said. "If you walk away now publicly clean, this still ends with reforms instead of funerals." Ezra leaned back. "And if I don't?" The young man's jaw set. "Then you force people to make uglier decisions." Ezra stood slowly, chains or not. "No," he said. "I force them to show who they already are." The woman held his gaze a long moment. Then she nodded once. "We'll proceed," she said. As they escorted him back down the hall, Ezra felt it. The shift, not retreat, not advance, commitment. The system had stopped weighing options. It had chosen to gamble. Ezra looked up at the ceiling lights sliding past. 48 hours had turned into something smaller now. And somewhere in the city, someone had just been told, "If he speaks, everything breaks." Ezra smiled to himself, because breaking was the point, and the closer they got to stopping him, the more they proved why he had to finish. The next move wouldn't be quiet, it would be desperate, and desperate moves always leave blood on the board. The only question left was whose. Desperation smells different, it doesn't rush, it tightens. Ezra felt it in the way the guards stopped rotating. Same faces, same silence. No jokes, no glances, that meant orders had come down clean. They moved him just before midnight. No explanation, no paperwork. Paper leaves trails. Tonight wasn't about trails. The elevator went down farther than before. Numbers blinking past that Ezra didn't remember seeing on any directory. Basements are where intentions show their teeth. When the doors opened, the air changed. Cooler, still. A hallway waited too long, too straight. Lights spaced perfectly, like someone had planned how far a man could walk before losing hope. At the end, a room, no windows, no clock, just a chair bolted to the floor. They didn't sit him down, they left him standing. Minutes passed, or hours. Time folds in places like this. Then the door opened. Not the young one, not the woman, someone older, gray hair, no file, no pretense. "You're forcing our hand," the man said, voice calm, practiced. Ezra studied him. This wasn't an operator, this was policy. "Hands get forced when they're already clenched," Ezra replied. The man smiled faintly. "You think this ends with a hearing?" Ezra shook his head. "I think it ends with a decision you don't want to explain." The man circled him slowly, like checking a structure for weak beams. "There are truths," the man said, "that destabilize more than they heal." Ezra met his eyes. "And there are lies that rot everything they touch." The man stopped. "You testify," he said. "And some of the people you think you're helping will suffer quietly. Budgets cut, programs folded, communities punished without names attached." Ezra's voice stayed steady. "So you're threatening ghosts?" No, the man corrected. I'm warning you about consequences you won't get to see. Ezra leaned forward just enough to change the balance. I've been living with consequences my whole life, he said. The difference now is you'll have to. Silence settled heavy. The man stepped back. You leave us very little room, he said. Ezra nodded. That's what corners are for. The man turned toward the door, paused. One more thing, he said without looking back. If something happens before you testify. Ezra cut him off. Then it proves everything, he said, and you know it. The door closed. Locks turned, more than one. Ezra stood alone in the quiet, breathing slow. Somewhere above him, phones were ringing. Lines crossed, permissions granted that couldn't be taken back. Somewhere else, Leia was sleeping, unaware that grown men were arguing over whether her father was more dangerous alive or gone. Ezra sat down at last. He felt no fear now, only clarity. The system had reached the point it always reaches, where it must decide whether to survive the truth or kill it and hope nobody notices the blood. Ezra stared at the door, waiting, because whatever came through it next wouldn't be a warning, it would be the final move, and he was ready to see who had the nerve to make it. They didn't come for him that night. That was the message. If they were going to erase him, it would have been quiet, quick, a stumble on the stairs, a heart that gave out. But silence meant debate, and debate meant leverage. Morning arrived without sunrise, just a light snapping on overhead. Food slid through a slot, untouched. An hour later, the slot opened again. Eat, a voice said, different voice. Younger, shakier. Ezra looked at the tray, then up. You nervous? He asked. The slot slammed shut. Good. Fear spreads faster than orders. Midday, the woman returned. No clipboard this time, no mask. She closed the door behind her. They're split, she said quietly. Ezra tilted his head. About whether you're a liability, she said. Or a shield. Ezra smiled thin. Same thing, he said. Depends which side you're standing on. She sat across from him, elbows on knees. You testify, she said. And this becomes bigger than Whitmore, bigger than camps, bigger than contracts. Ezra nodded. That's how truth works. It doesn't stay where you put it. She hesitated. There are people, she said, choosing each word, who think removing you solves the problem. Ezra leaned back. And the others? They think touching you makes you a martyr, she said. And martyrs don't shut up, they multiply. Ezra's eyes locked on hers. So what do you think? She held his gaze. I think, she said slowly, you already won the moment you refused to be scared. A beat, they're moving the hearing up, she continued. Tomorrow morning. Ezra's breath slowed. That was faster than fear, that was panic. They don't want time for organizing, she said. No marches, no crowds. Ezra stood. And my daughter. The woman's voice softened. She'll be there, she said. Front row. They tried to argue against it. And they lost. Ezra nodded once. Good. She stood as well, hand on the door. One last thing, she said. If something goes wrong tomorrow. Ezra finished it for her. It won't be an accident. Didn't deny it. When she left, Ezra sat back down. He closed his eyes, not to pray, to remember. Martha's whisper in the dark. William's hands shaking over stolen pages. Children asking to be taken. A girl climbing a fence barefoot into the night. This wasn't about winning. It was about making sure the line never got comfortable again. Footsteps approached. Not guards, many. Ezra opened his eyes. Tomorrow wasn't a hearing, it was an exposure. And systems hate witnesses more than criminals. Because criminals break rules, witnesses break stories. And by morning, Ezra Cole was about to step into a room where the story had been protected for decades. And tell it to its face, if he walked out alive, was no longer the real question. The real question was whether the truth would. And judging by the way the building hummed with panic, someone already knew the answer. The ride to the courthouse wasn't long. That was intentional. Short distances leave less room for rescue, less room for witnesses, less room for mistakes. 2 vehicles, no sirens, no windows that opened. Ezra sat straight, hands folded, breathing slow. Across from him, Leia did the same. She hadn't cried, hadn't asked questions. That scared the escorts more than fear ever would. The building appeared suddenly, stone and glass rising like it had always been there, like it hadn't been built for moments exactly like this. They led Ezra through a side entrance. Not the front. Not yet. Inside, the air buzzed. Voices layered over each other. Shoes moving fast. Paper shuffling like nervous hands. Someone was losing control of the narrative and everyone could feel it. They separated him from Leia at the door. 10 minutes, one of the men said. Ezra stopped walking. She stays where I can see her. A pause, a calculation, then a nod. 10 minutes later, the doors opened. The room was smaller than Ezra expected. That was another choice. Small rooms feel manageable, contained. They forget sound travels farther when it's sharp. Ezra stepped forward, every head turned. Whitmore was already seated, older now, thinner, still clean, still calm, still convinced God was on his side. Their eyes met. Whitmore smiled, not smug, not cruel, relieved. Like a man who believes the worst is already behind him, Ezra took his seat. The judge entered. The room stood. Then silence, formal words followed. Purpose, jurisdiction, inquiry. All of it scaffolding. Ezra waited for the moment that mattered. It came faster than expected. Mr. Cole, the judge said, you may begin. Ezra stood. No notes, no pauses. He didn't look at Whitmore, he looked at the room. At some point, Ezra said, voice steady, someone decided suffering needed better handwriting. A ripple, he continued. They stopped calling it ownership, started calling it obligation, stopped using chains, started using ink. Whitmore shifted. Ezra didn't slow. I signed a paper because the alternative was disappearance. I worked because refusal added time. I stayed quiet because speaking cost more. A reporter's pen snapped. Ezra's voice lowered. My daughter was taken because a form said orphan. No one checked, no one asked, the paper said enough. Leia stood in the front row. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the space Ezra left between words. And here's the part they don't tell you, Ezra said. When you build a system like this, you don't need bad men. Whitmore looked up. You just need obedient ones. The room went still. Ezra turned finally to Whitmore. You didn't whip me, Ezra said. You didn't chase me. You didn't drag my daughter from her bed. Whitmore nodded slightly. And yet, Ezra continued. Every step was signed. Whitmore opened his mouth. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said. You'll have your turn. Ezra sat. The damage was already done. Whitmore stood slowly, smoothed his jacket. He smiled at the room. My friends, he began. What you've heard is pain, and pain deserves compassion. Ezra watched carefully now. This system, Whitmore said, was never perfect, but it was necessary. There it was, the old lie dressed in calm clothes. Whitmore spread his hands. Without structure, he said, chaos follows. Without discipline, freedom collapses. Ezra leaned forward. Then why, he said quietly, did it only ever collapse on our necks? Whitmore froze just for a second. The judge leaned in. Answer the question, he said. Whitmore swallowed, and for the first time his voice wavered. Because, he said, choosing carefully, someone had to pay the cost of transition. The room exhaled all at once. Ezra closed his eyes. There it was, not a mistake, not an accident, a bill sent to the same address it always had been. The judge sat back. That will be all, he said to Whitmore. The Reverend sat down slowly, pale now. The judge turned back to Ezra. You understand, he said, that what you've said today won't just affect this case. Ezra nodded. It already has. The judge paused. We'll recess. The gavel struck just once. As people stood, noise erupted. Questions, shouts, footsteps scrambling for exits. But Ezra stayed seated because he felt it. That shift again. Not fear, not debate, decision. Two men near the back didn't move. They watched Ezra, didn't take notes, didn't speak. Ezra met their eyes. They looked away first. Leia reached his side. "Papa," she whispered. "Are we safe now?" Ezra looked toward the exit, toward the men who had stopped pretending. "I don't know," he said honestly, but as the guards moved in, not toward him but around him, forming a wall instead of a cage, Ezra realized something else. The system hadn't chosen to kill him, not today. It had chosen something harder, containment. And containment only works if the story stops spreading. Ezra squeezed Leia's hand, because the doors were opening again. Not for questions, not for applause, but for the part of the fight. That happens after the truth gets loose. They didn't arrest him. That was the first mistake. If they'd put cuffs on Ezra, dragged him out in front of cameras, slapped a charge on his name, the story would have ended clean. Instead, they escorted him, carefully, politely, like men carrying something fragile they didn't understand. Outside, the air was thick with voices. Reporters pressed forward, microphones out, questions flying fast and sloppy. "Mr. Cole, was this slavery? Is the program being shut down? Do you fear retaliation?" Ezra stopped walking. The guards stiffened. That wasn't on the schedule. Ezra turned just enough for the cameras to catch his face. "I don't fear retaliation," he said calmly. "I expect it." The flashbulbs went wild. That sentence was already leaving the building. They rushed him into a car before anyone could ask the next question, the dangerous one. The ride back was louder than the one there. Phones buzzing, radios crackling, orders stepping on top of each other. No one was in charge anymore. Ezra watched the city slide past the tinted glass, streets full of people who didn't know yet that the ground had shifted under them. Leia leaned against him. "You meant what you said," she whispered, "about expecting it." "Yes," Ezra said. "Then why look so calm?" Ezra smiled faintly. "Because when men start protecting systems instead of people," he said, "they stop thinking clearly." They pulled into a different building this time. Smaller, older, no sign out front. That's where decisions get made when nobody wants fingerprints. Inside, they separated Ezra and Leia again. This time, Ezra didn't resist. He already knew. A man in a dark suit waited in the room. No badge, no file, just confidence. "Mr. Cole," the man said, extending a hand Ezra didn't take. "You've made your point." Ezra sat. "You don't call a meeting to say that," he replied. The man smiled thin. "You're going to disappear from this conversation," he said, publicly. Ezra raised an eyebrow, and privately. "You'll live," the man said, quietly, somewhere else. Ezra leaned forward. "And my daughter?" The man hesitated, just long enough. "She'll be taken care of." Ezra stood. "Wrong answer." The man sighed. "You've already won more than most ever do," he said. "Why keep pushing?" Ezra's voice dropped. "Because winning that way means agreeing to forget the one still inside." Silence fell hard. The man studied him like a cracked mirror, seeing something familiar and hating it. "You know what happens to men who don't accept exits," the man said. Ezra nodded. "They get turned into warnings." The man smiled. "Exactly." Ezra smiled back. "Then you should hurry." The man's expression faltered. "What?" "Because," Ezra said calmly, "you're not the only one who knows where I am." The door opened. Not guards, phones. The room filled with people speaking too fast, too loud. Someone had leaked the offer. Someone always does. The man in the suit stepped back, face tight. "This just got complicated," he muttered. Ezra sat back down. "No," he said, "it got public." Outside, sirens wailed, not for him, but because crowds were forming where they weren't supposed to. The system hadn't contained the story. It had accelerated it. Ezra closed his eyes for half a second. Because the next phase was always the most dangerous. When power realizes it can't erase you and starts deciding how expensive it's willing to let you become, that's when protection turns into surveillance. They didn't say it out loud, didn't need to, Ezra felt it the moment they moved him again. Same day, different building, different tone. The men around him weren't there to guard him. They were there to watch him breathe. Leia stayed close now, too close. They wanted her visible, human shield, public insurance. That told Ezra everything. The room they put them in had windows this time. Big ones. That wasn't kindness, that was strategy. Let him be seen, let him be counted, let him feel how many eyes were suddenly attached to his pulse. A woman entered, not the same one as before. Older. Careful face. The kind that survived 3 administrations by never committing to any of them. You understand what happens next, she said. Ezra looked past her out the glass. I understand what usually happens next. She didn't like that. You'll be protected, she said, within reason. Ezra smiled. There's no such thing as reasonable protection, he said. Only how loud the room gets when I stop talking. Leia squeezed his hand. They're scared, she whispered. Ezra nodded. Yes, he said, and they should be. The woman exhaled. The hearing triggered reviews, she said. Internal audits, federal oversight. Ezra finally looked at her. And how many doors just quietly closed on people who needed help? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. You've put us in a bind, she said. People want accountability, but they also want stability. Ezra stood. Stability built on silence is just a pause, he said. It ends the moment someone remembers how to speak. The woman studied him. You're not angry, she said. No, Ezra replied, I'm focused. She hesitated, then asked the real question. What do you want? Ezra didn't answer right away. He looked at Leia, at the city beyond the glass. At the camps still operating, he said. At the schools that aren't schools, at the contracts that never end. He turned back to her. I want daylight, he said, everywhere. The woman shook her head slowly. That's not a request, she said. That's a war. Ezra smiled. No, he said, it's an audit. Her phone buzzed. She checked it once. Twice, her jaw tightened. They're asking for you again, she said. Press, committees, people who didn't care yesterday and can't afford not to today. Ezra nodded. Good. She paused at the door. One last thing, she said. You should know there are still men who believe this ends if you do. Ezra's voice stayed level. Then they better be sure, he said. They don't, miss. The woman left. The door locked. Ezra sat beside his daughter. Somewhere in the city, headlines were being rewritten. Names were being underlined. Phones were ringing in rooms that had never heard urgency before. The truth was no longer contained. It was moving. And Ezra knew something else now. Men who survive this part don't get to go back to being private. They become symbols, targets, and leverage. Ezra looked down at Leia. You still with me? He asked quietly. She nodded all the way. Ezra closed his eyes, because the next knock on that door wouldn't be about testimony. It would be about ownership, and whether the story belonged to the people who lived it, or the people who'd spent generations burying it. The knock came softer than expected. That's how you know it matters. Ezra didn't move right away. Neither did Leia. Silence is a tool. Use it long enough and the other side starts negotiating with itself. The door opened anyway. 3 people this time. Not guards, not officials. Fixers. You could tell by the way they looked at the room instead of the people in it. Already calculating what would need cleaning afterward, the one in front spoke first. Mr. Cole, he said, voice smooth. You've outpaced the original plan. Ezra nodded. Happens when the truth doesn't wait its turn. The fixer smiled politely, didn't enjoy the exchange but respected it. We're here to simplify things, he said. Ezra glanced at Leia. She stayed still. Good. Simple for who? Ezra asked. For everyone, the fixer replied. You, your daughter, and the institution's currently hemorrhaging credibility. Ezra leaned back in his chair. That sounds expensive. The fixer didn't deny it. You'll be relocated, he said. New names, new place, federal stipends, educational guarantees for your daughter. Ezra listened. That mattered more than money ever would. And in return, Ezra asked. The fixer spread his hands. You stop talking, he said. No interviews. No committees, no second act. Ezra's jaw tightened. Leah spoke before he could stop her. What about the kids still there? The room shifted, not because of the question, but because of who asked it. The fixer looked at her carefully now. They'll be handled, he said. Ezra laughed. Once. Dry. That's what everyone says right before nothing changes. The fixer's smile thinned. You're asking for structural collapse, he said. That costs lives. Ezra stood. So does pretending things are fine. The fixer stepped closer. You think you're irreplaceable, he said softly. You're not. Ezra met his eyes. No, he agreed. I'm just inconvenient. A beat and inconvenient things, Ezra continued. Don't disappear anymore. They go viral. The fixer turned to the others. A look passed between them. This wasn't going how it was supposed to. Last offer, the fixer said. Protection for your daughter, guaranteed. Ezra didn't hesitate. Put it in writing, he said. Public. The fixer exhaled slowly. You know we can't do that. Ezra nodded. Then you don't actually want it to stop. Silence settled heavy. Finally, the fixer stepped back. We'll be in touch, he said. Ezra smiled. That's what scares me. They left without another word. The door locked again. Leah let out a breath she'd been holding. Papa, she said quietly. Were they lying? Ezra looked at the door. At least 3 different ways, he said. She leaned into him. Are we in danger? Ezra wrapped an arm around her. Yes, he said honestly, but not the way they think. Outside, the city roared louder than before. Helicopters now. Crowds. Chants starting to form without anyone organizing them. The story was no longer owned by any room Ezra had been in, and somewhere far above, people were realizing something terrifying. If they couldn't buy his silence, and they couldn't bury him quietly, then the only thing left was to gamble on chaos. Ezra closed his eyes because the next move wouldn't come with a knock, it would come disguised as help, and that's always when the trap snaps shut. Help arrived dressed like Mercy. They didn't announce it, didn't escort it in. It just appeared. A woman with a soft voice and a badge Ezra hadn't seen before stood in the doorway when the lock clicked open. No fixers, no suits, just a clipboard and concern. I'm here for the child, she said gently. Ezra didn't move. Leah's fingers tightened around his sleeve. For what reason? Ezra asked. The woman glanced at her notes, didn't look up. Temporary relocation, she said. Safety, emotional stability. Ezra stood slowly. That's not protection, he said. That's separation. The woman finally met his eyes. Mr. Cole, she said, rehearsed calm. Your situation is volatile. Children shouldn't be exposed to. To what? Ezra cut in. Truth. She shifted her weight. We can ensure she's safe, she said, out of the spotlight. Ezra stepped between them. No. The word landed heavy. The woman sighed. You don't have to make this harder than it needs to be. Ezra smiled without warmth. You already did. Another voice came from the hallway. Stand down. The woman froze. The older official, the careful one, stepped into view. She looked tired now, edges worn down. This is not authorized, she said sharply. The woman protested. Paperwork was mentioned, protocols. The older official shut it down with a look. Leave, she said. The door closed again. Ezra didn't relax. Not yet. That, Ezra said quietly, was the trap. The official nodded. They're trying to fracture you, she admitted. If they can't stop the story, they'll try to isolate the source. Ezra looked down at Leah. She doesn't go anywhere without me. The official hesitated. That makes things complicated. Ezra met her gaze. Complicated is better than buried. She exhaled. There's a transport leaving tonight, she said. Secure location, press blackout. Ezra shook his head. No. Her eyes widened. You can't stay here, she said. This building is already compromised. Ezra leaned in slightly. Then don't hide me, he said. Move me forward. Silence, she understood what he meant. You want to walk, she said slowly, publicly. Ezra nodded, with her. The official looked toward the door, toward the world waiting outside. That would force their hand, she said. Ezra smiled. Good. She stared at him for a long moment, then she nodded. I'll make a call, she said. When she left, Ezra sat back down. His heart was steady now, because he knew this phase, when the system realizes hiding you won't work. And silencing you costs too much. It tries to rush you through the open door, hoping the noise drowns out what you're saying. Ezra looked at Leia. You ready? He asked. She nodded. Are you? He thought about the rooms, the contracts, the children whispering in the dark. Yes, he said, because once he stepped outside again, there would be no walls left to blame, only faces, and somewhere in that crowd would be someone desperate enough to try and end this the old way. In public, where accidents become warnings, Ezra stood. The building trembled faintly beneath their feet, and for the first time since this began, he knew the danger wasn't behind him anymore. It was waiting in the open. They didn't walk him out through the front doors. They walked him toward them. That difference matters. Hallways widened. Footsteps multiplied. Voices leaked in through stone like pressure through cracks. Ezra could feel the crowd before he saw it. Sound carries fear better than sight ever could. The older official stayed half a step behind him now, not leading, not following, witnessing. That told Ezra everything he needed to know. When the doors opened, the noise hit like heat. Shouts, chants trying to agree on words. Cameras lifted like weapons. The city had come to see what courage looked like up close. And whether it bled, Ezra stepped out first. No hesitation, Leia at his side. The crowd surged, then stalled. Something in his stillness slowed them. That happens when people realize the moment is bigger than their questions. Mr. Cole. Is this over? Are you safe? Ezra raised one hand, not waving, stopping. The noise thinned. He spoke without shouting. This isn't over, he said. It's visible. A murmur rippled. And I'm not safe, he continued, but neither is the lie anymore. Cameras zoomed in. Ezra felt it then, the pull not from the crowd, from somewhere off to the side, a gap that didn't belong. He shifted his stance slightly, pulled Leia closer. The older official noticed. So did the men pretending to be press. Ezra's mind went quiet. This was the moment systems count on. When noise hides intention, a man stepped forward too fast, not yelling, not armed the way movies do it. Hand buried in a jacket, eyes fixed. Ezra didn't move. He'd learned long ago. Panic gives men permission. The official shouted something. Guards lunged. The crowd screamed as one. Time fractured. Ezra turned his body just enough to shield Leia. A sound cracked through the air. Not loud, final. Then chaos swallowed everything, people running, cameras falling, shouts losing words. Ezra hit the ground hard. Pain bloomed sharp and immediate. He tasted iron. Hands grabbed him, lifted him halfway. Papa. Leia screamed. Ezra forced his eyes open. The man was down, not dead, but not moving right. Blood stained the pavement, not Ezra-s, not yet. Sirens rushed closer, too many, too fast. Ezra breathed through the pain. He was alive. That mattered for now. As they pulled him up, as medics rushed in, Ezra met the eyes of the man who tried to end it. There was no hate there, just belief. The kind that gets handed down, the kind that thinks it's necessary. Ezra swallowed, because this wasn't the last attempt. It was the first one that failed publicly. And that meant the rules were about to change again. They rushed him toward an ambulance. Leia's hand never left his. As the doors slammed shut and the siren wailed, Ezra stared at the ceiling, not afraid, not relieved, certain. The story had crossed the line, and from here on out, every move against him would cost more than the last. Ambulances lie, they call it transport, but everyone inside knows it's containment with wheels. The doors slammed shut, sound sealing them in. Sirens screamed, not for urgency. For control, Ezra lay still, eyes open. Pain pulsed along his side, hot and deliberate like a reminder. A medic pressed gauze hard. "Stay with me," the medic said. Ezra looked at him. "I never left." Leah sat tight against him, her hand gripping his sleeve like an anchor. Her breathing was fast but steady. That mattered. The medic glanced at the driver, then back at Ezra. "You took a hit," he said. "Lucky angle." Ezra nodded. Luck was just bad planning on someone else's part. As the ambulance turned, Ezra felt it. The wrong turn. Too smooth, too early. Hospitals don't sit this quiet. Ezra shifted his eyes toward the small rear window. Street signs slid past. None of them familiar. He squeezed Leia's hand once. That was enough. The medic noticed. "Relax," he said quickly. "We're rerouting. Security concerns." Ezra smiled faintly. Security for who? The medic didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the IV. Hand steady, too steady. That's when Ezra saw it. No hospital bracelet on the medic's wrist. No watch either. Just bare skin. Clean. People who plan long nights don't wear things that tick. The ambulance slowed. Not traffic, decision. Ezra spoke softly, almost kindly. "You don't want to do this," he said. The medic swallowed. "I don't have a choice." Ezra met his eyes. "There's always a choice," he said. "There's just a price attached." The ambulance stopped, engine still running. No sirens now. Silence rushed in heavy, doors unlocked. The medic stepped back. Another man appeared outside. No uniform, no rush, just purpose. Leia's breath caught. Ezra sat up despite the pain. "Let her go," Ezra said calmly. "She's not part of this." The man outside smiled thin. "She's the reason this stays quiet." Ezra nodded slowly. That was the truth of it. He shifted his weight, testing what hurt. A lot of things still worked. Good. Somewhere far away, the city was still shouting his name. Somewhere closer, a decision was being made that wouldn't show up on any report. Ezra looked down at Leia. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "remember this." The man outside interrupted. "Time." Ezra looked back up. "No," he said, "history." He moved before they expected it, not fast, certain. The ambulance rocked violently. Someone shouted. The door slammed back, and in that chaos, that half second where control slips, Ezra knew one thing for sure. If this ended here, it wouldn't end clean, and if it didn't end here, then the people who ordered this were about to learn the most dangerous truth of all. Some stories don't die, they fight back. Chaos doesn't last long, but it lasts long enough. The ambulance lurched sideways, metal screaming as it kissed the curb. The man outside stumbled back, surprised by motion instead of fear. That's the advantage of certainty. It moves before hesitation finishes its sentence. Ezra twisted, pain ripping through his side like fire. Didn't matter. He grabbed the medic's wrist hard, turned it just enough. Bones don't need much encouragement. The medic cried out, went down. Leia screamed his name. "Eyes on me," Ezra said, voice steady. "Not them." The back doors burst open. Night air rushed in. The second man reached inside. Ezra kicked. Not high, not wild, precise. Knee, balance gone. The man fell back into the street, cursing. Ezra didn't chase. He never had. He pulled Leia close, half-carried her out, feet hitting asphalt hard and uneven. The city wasn't quiet here. That mattered. A dog barked. A window lit up. Someone shouted, "What the hell?" Ezra turned down the nearest alley, shadows swallowing them whole. His breath came heavy now. Blood soaked the gauze, but his mind was sharp. They ran until running wasn't possible. Then they walked fast, then slower. Finally, they stopped beneath a flickering streetlight that couldn't decide if it wanted to work. Leia pressed her face into his chest. "I thought they were helping," she whispered. Ezra rested his forehead against hers. "That's how it always starts," he said. "Help is the cleanest disguise power has." Sirens wailed in the distance. Real ones this time, not coming for them, not yet. Ezra scanned the street. No tails, no shadows breaking wrong. For the moment they were free, but freedom like this comes with a receipt. Someone had crossed a line tonight, not a fixer, not a believer. Someone high enough to think an ambulance could disappear a problem. Ezra straightened, pain clawing at him. "Listen to me," he said softly. "From now on, nobody moves us unless everyone knows where we are." Leah nodded. "We don't hide anymore?" she asked. Ezra looked down the street toward the glow of the city. "No," he said, "we stand where they can see us." Because now it was clear. This wasn't about testimony or reform. This was about whether power could still reach out in the dark and take what scared it. And after tonight, Ezra knew something they didn't. They failed quietly, which meant the next attempt wouldn't be quiet at all. It would be loud, public, and meant to remind everyone watching, who was still supposed to be afraid. Ezra took Leah's hand and started walking again, toward light, toward noise, toward the place where mistakes get witnessed, because the game had changed, and someone somewhere was already deciding how far they were willing to go. To finish what they'd started, they didn't make it 3 blocks. That's how fast word travels when mistakes get expensive. A black sedan rolled slow past the alley mouth, didn't stop, didn't need to. Ezra felt it anyway. Pressure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's polite. He turned Leah down a side street lit just enough to pretend it was safe. Windows watched. Doors stayed closed. People sense danger the same way animals do. They don't need explanations. At the end of the block stood a church. Old brick. No sign. Ezra smiled once. Places like that remember things. He pushed the door, unlocked. Inside smelled like dust and candles and unfinished prayers. They moved to the back pew. Ezra sat hard, breath finally breaking rhythm. Leah knelt beside him, hands shaking now that running was done. "They almost took us," she said. "Yes," Ezra replied. "And now they can't pretend they didn't try." That's the cost of public failure. Footsteps outside, more than one. Ezra didn't reach for anything. He didn't have to. The door opened. Not armed men, people, phones out, faces tight. A woman stepped forward. "You're bleeding," she said. "We saw the ambulance on the news, then it vanished." Ezra nodded. "So did I," he said. Someone laughed nervously. Another voice spoke up. "They said you refused treatment." Ezra looked around the sanctuary. "They lied," he said. "I escaped it." That did something to the room. Fear shifted into anger. That's when movements start. A man near the door spoke quietly. "My cousin works ER," he said. "Ambulances don't reroute like that." Another added, "My brother's a reporter. He's already asking questions." Ezra leaned back. This is how protection really starts. Not with badges, with witnesses. Leah sat beside him, watching adults recalibrate in real time. "Papa," she whispered, "are they on our side?" Ezra shook his head gently. "Not yet," he said, "but they're not on theirs anymore." Outside, sirens returned. Slower now, careful. Real responders this time, too many eyes, too much footage. The door opened again. Uniforms, real ones. They stopped short when they saw the room full. Someone muttered, "Jesus." Ezra stood. Blood darkened his shirt. He didn't hide it. "This is where we are," he said calmly, "and this is who saw us arrive." A pause, then a nod from the lead officer. "We'll need statements," the officer said. Ezra smiled thin. "You'll get more than that." The officer hesitated. "From everyone." Ezra looked around the church. People already raising phones, already texting. "Yes," Ezra said, "from everyone." Silence held for a beat. Then the officer said the words that changed everything. "We'll secure the perimeter." Not remove them, not transport, secure. That's the sound of control slipping. As medics finally stepped forward, real ones this time, Ezra felt the edge dull just a little. Not safety. Visibility. He sat back down, because now the question wasn't whether someone would try again. It was whether they'd dare do it. With this many witnesses breathing the same air, Ezra closed his eyes briefly. The game wasn't over, but the board was crowded now, and crowded boards make predators nervous. By morning the story had a heartbeat, not controlled, not edited, alive. Ezra woke to murmurs, phones vibrating nonstop, names being said out loud that weren't supposed to leave offices. The church was still full, not with prayers, with decisions. Uniforms stood at the doors now, not blocking people out. blocking anyone else in. That's when Ezra knew the balance had tipped. You don't guard a man unless you're afraid of who might reach him. A federal vehicle arrived just after sunrise, unmarked, on purpose. Two people stepped out, no rush, no badges displayed. Confidence doesn't wear identification. The older official returned with them. Her face was done pretending. "This ends today," she said quietly. Ezra looked up from the pew. "No," he replied, "it decides today." One of the newcomers studied Ezra like a chessboard. "You forced exposure," the man said. "Now comes containment." Ezra stood, ignoring the pain. "Containment failed last night," he said. "You should have learned." The man nodded. "That's why we're changing tactics." He glanced at Leia. "For the next 24 hours," he said, "every camera will be on you, every move documented. You'll be untouchable." Ezra didn't smile. "And after?" The man didn't answer. That was the answer. "You testify again," the woman added. "Formal indictment, names named, no walking it back." Ezra looked around the church, at the strangers who'd become witnesses, at the phones already broadcasting. "At the end of this," Ezra said, "someone's going to be blamed." The man replied evenly, "Yes." Ezra nodded. "Then make sure it's the right someone." Sirens wailed again. This time not nearby, across the city, multiple locations, raids, paper finally catching up to pain. The woman checked her phone. "Whitmore's been taken into custody," she said. "No press release yet." Ezra closed his eyes. It wasn't victory. It was blood in the water. Predators don't disappear when wounded. They thrash. Hard, the man stepped closer. "You need to understand," he said, voice low. "When this goes public in full, someone will try one last time." Ezra opened his eyes. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not going anywhere." Outside, crowds gathered again. Bigger now, angrier, not chanting, waiting. Ezra took Leia's hand. The city had made up its mind faster than the institutions ever could, and somewhere, someone who'd bet everything on silence was staring at screens, watching control slip, deciding whether to disappear or burn the board on the way out. The last move didn't come from the shadows, it came from pride. Ezra stood at the steps as the crowd pressed close, faces tight, eyes hungry for truth they could finally recognize. Leia at his side. No armor left but daylight. The man who tried to end it the quiet way never showed again. That told Ezra everything. Instead, a name surfaced, not whispered, spoken, a name with signatures under it, a name that believed rules bent out of respect. By noon, the city knew it. By afternoon, the cameras did. The hearing reconvened, open this time, too open to control. Ezra didn't testify again. He didn't need to. The documents spoke. The footage spoke. The crowd spoke. Systems hate choruses. Arrests followed, not clean, not enough, but real. Programs frozen, accounts locked, boards dissolved. Whitmore's name broke last. Not as a villain, but as a caution. The most dangerous men aren't loud. They're certain. By nightfall, the older official returned one last time. "This is as far as we can push today," she said. "More will come, but not fast." Ezra nodded. "Fast breaks things," he said. "Slow makes them change." She hesitated. "There will be backlash." Ezra looked at the crowd still waiting outside. "Then let it arrive where people can see it." Leia squeezed his hand. "Are we done?" she asked. Ezra knelt to her level. "We're finished being quiet," he said. "That's different." They walked away without escort. No sirens, no cover, just noise and light and people who decided the story belonged to them now. Behind them, the building stood smaller than it had that morning, because buildings only feel powerful when everyone agrees not to question what's inside. Ezra didn't look back. He didn't need to. Somewhere tonight, contracts were being reread. Locks were being tested. Men who'd slept well for decades were counting exits. The machine would keep running. It always does. But it would never run the same again. Because a man stepped into the open, refused to disappear, and taught a city how to watch. And once people learn to watch, power never gets comfortable again.